Hey folks, we need to talk about board governance, about work on boards. A lot of you are probably on boards of a business, of a nonprofit, of a homeowners association, and all of these positions have challenges that are in common with one another and are often not very well resourced. And that's too bad because boards have an enormous amount of leverage and it's also a very challenging position to be in. Why is it challenging? Well, it's probably not for the reason that you think. If you ask a board member what is their number one challenge, if it's a nonprofit, almost always the answer is going to be fundraising. And if it's not fundraising, it's going to be Melissa or Jeff or that one, problematic personality that you can't get along with on the board. But I'm here to tell you that it really is none of those things. Your number one challenge as a board member on any board is throughput. Why is that? Because as a board, you have to handle all of the decisions that happen within the organization, and you have 2 hours once a quarter to do it, maybe a half day if you're lucky. So how in the world can you meaningfully affect change without a radical rethink of the way that you are approaching that information and that decision making? That's the problem right there, is that we need a radical rethink of the way that we are approaching the task of being on a board. Most people get into a board position with zero training on how to be a board member, or maybe a short orientation, which really is not a training on how to be a board member, but it's more a training about the organization. That needs to change and it can improve. And it's problematic because a lot of the people who are on boards are really amazing people, right? We asked them to be on the board because they were really successful in an area of expertise that we need on that board. Maybe they've been really successful and they also bring funds, which they want to dedicate to the work of that nonprofit. Or maybe they're just a really exceptional high capacity person. All of those things are important and valuable, but without additional training, without additional understanding of the specific tasks and skills that we need to be a board, we are still going to struggle. We're still going to deal with the challenge of throughput. The way I think about a board is that you have the entire hierarchy of an organization that at the top culminates in the executive director or the CEO. Then you have an opposite hierarchy, an upside down triangle, which is the board members and the board chair. And so all of the information, all of the decision making has to pass through the CEO and the board chair into the realm of the board. And that realm should be the realm of ownership, long-term vision, governance, policy setting. And it's sort of an abstract mirror. You see these two triangles. The board world is sort of an abstract mirror of everything that happens within the organization or the company. So we need some specific training, and there are best practices on how to function in that other side of the mirror. I'll just throw out a couple of the best practices, and there are many more. These need to be incorporated into a board training, and they will address the specific problems that you're dealing with. A couple of best practices. A lot of what I've learned, I've taken from the Carver model, which is a policy model of governance and has a lot of specifics that are helpful. There are other things that don't come from within the Carver model that I also think are helpful. But just a couple of best practices for board members that you want to include in your training. Number one, the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a section of your agenda where you put all of the routine matters, things that have come from committee or that are repeating. They need to be reviewed ahead of time, and by their presence on the consent agenda, they have been moved and seconded, and so they can be passed with a single vote. That frees up an enormous amount of time from your meetings to be able to focus on what really matters. Another best practice is the use of policy. Policy are like standing decisions that the board has made that guide what happens within the organization at a broad level, then that do not require discussion from quarter to quarter or from meeting to meeting. And both of these best practices serve the third and most important best practice for increasing throughput, which is focusing on the future. A board should spend 80%, 90% of its time looking outside the organization and looking towards the future, not looking inside the organization and looking to receiving reports and processing information about the past. So if you can adopt board best practices and train your board members so that they're able to spend 80% of their time on future and external rather than past and internal, you are going to vastly increase the effectiveness of your board. There are many other things that we can include. I would love to hear what you have found helpful or what questions and challenges you're struggling with as a board. I think it's something that we really should be resourcing more heavily because boards have a lot of leverage and they are filling a really important place, and so we need to give them the resources that they need in order to be successful.